Come on now, people.
Fuck 'em. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. Tell 'em what you need. S-K-I-double-L. In this lane of lyricism where the warriors dwell. S-K-I-double-L. In this land of lyricism where the warriors dwell. In this. In this land of lyricism where the warriors dwell.
Oh my goodness.
All right, everybody, good morning. Welcome to Slow News Day Morning Edition. My name is Steve-Poikonen, and I'm hanging out in Central California, and I hope you're doing well wherever you are, wherever you're listening, and whatever platform you're listening to us on. Probably going to be a short show over on the YouTubes, probably. We most of what we're going to be talking about, which by the way will be joined by investigative journalist, documentary filmmaker, general all around badass Dan Cohen here in about 5 or so minutes to get into all of that. So hopefully enough of you are driven by a decent title or thumbnail or fans of Dan's will be piling into the YouTubes here quickly, and then we could go from there. You know, we could always feed you biscuits and gravy twice a week, Erie. We can make it happen. We can. I believe in you. We'll run through the business real quick, guys. All of the regular donate links are up and running. You can pretty much find any of the Cash App, PayPal, all that stuff at SlowNewsDayShow. Buy your favorite Tech Ninja Sleepy Josh coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Bort, B-O-R-T. There will be the month of January GoFundMe launch today. I haven't done it yet. Just all there is to it. I fucking hate this shit, so I put it off and don't do it. And then pay for it at the end. So I got to get over that. We have t-shirts and they are awesome, and you should get one. They are at Truth Revolution Clothing. It's truthclothing.io. New t-shirt designs underway. I've got to get with Kate as soon as the show's done this morning and send her over some more artwork from our good friend Johnny Bravado. Finally going to get the gas mask family that you guys have seen for the last several years now. The sort of the Slow News Day logo that's getting merched up. Stoked on that. Looking forward to what comes out of it. The QR code in the corner, of course, belongs to Matrix Bars. They sponsor the show. They say accurate things about their product. They occasionally send me some. 3.5 grams psilocybin mushrooms per delicious chocolate bar, 4 very yummy flavors. Go ahead and jump down that particular rabbit hole. Hit them up on Twitter or Instagram at Matrix Genetics, MatrixGenetix. Very good morning to Shadow Band Refugee, Uncle Warren. We got Hobbs in the house. What's up, Hobbs? Jefferson Airplane is requiring proof of an Owsley approved acid test before boarding. Is that the airplane or the Starship? Maybe both. I'd accept both. Thank you very much for the super chat, brother. Appreciate it. I hope you do well today, and hope it's going good for you. To kind of set all of this up, because somewhere in the next like 3 to 7 minutes or so, Dan should be showing up. A couple of weeks back, Harris County, Texas, had reported the first Omicron death in America, and it was in a red state. Dirty, unvaccinated people in red state bringing death and plague to, like, that's really how they were trying to push it. So Dan did, well, he did journalism. He did. It's a rare thing that happens occasionally, every once in a while, where somebody will hear something reported and go, I wonder if that's true. Let me call. So he did. And Matt Orfala, fuck. Yeah. Well, if the channel dies today, the channel dies today. That's where we're at. We still have other ones. Let's go find this. So Matt Orfala put together this video, which includes audio from Dan's conversation with with Harris County. So we're gonna roll that, and then we'll just kind of jump into it once Dan shows up and go from there. This is quite good. Shouts to Matt. He's one of the best. See if I can full screen this shit.
Confirmed that the patient died from COVID, but we can say that he was Omicron positive at the time of his death.
So he died with COVID, but you can't say that he died from COVID.
Correct.
Texas confirmed the first death from Omicron here in the U.S. Whoops. The U.S. has now confirmed its first death from Omicron.
Death as COVID surges are surging.
Our first Omicron-related death.
The nation now with its first known death from Omicron.
First confirmed death from the Omicron variant.
The U.S. has also now confirmed its first known death from the Omicron variant.
It's the first known death from Omicron.
The first person confirmed to have died of Omicron in the U.S.
We've just confirmed the first death in the United States due to the Omicron variant.
Death now from the Omicron variant.
First death due to the Omicron variant.
Death from the Omicron variant in the U.S.
The U.S. suffered its first death from the new strain.
It is very possible there have been other deaths.
The first death from the Omicron variant.
The U.S. has reported its first death linked to the Omicron variant.
We're going to see certainly hospitalizations and deaths. The one thing that we are seeing is that, if anything, it does not appear to be more severe. It might, in fact, be less severe, but we're holding off on that till we see how it does in our own country.
So, I mean, you haven't seen the worst of Omicron.
You're absolutely correct.
Hospitals are now bracing for an ominous outbreak of Omicron.
Here's Omicron.
The country appears to be slipping into a COVID vice tonight. The aggressive Delta variant squeezing us from one side, the more contagious Omicron strain multiplying on the other.
Motherfucker, you! Omicron spreading at breakneck speed.
It really feels like our holiday events may be hanging in the balance.
A man in Texas is the first known death in the United States due to the Omicron variant.
First known U.S. death.
Death
related to the Omicron variant. Dr. Anthony Fauci is talking about Omicron.
A virus that's capable of hospitalizing and killing people.
Houston is reporting the first known death from the Omicron variant.
You're going to see deaths due to this.
Of course, we're going to have deaths like what we see now.
Health officials in Texas have confirmed the first Omicron-related death, the first Omicron death as well, confirming the first death.
The first reported death now
death from Omicron in the country.
First recorded death in the U.S. from Omicron.
The first known Omicron death.
The Omicron variant of COVID-19 has arrived in full force. And so in response to all of this, today I'm raising the COVID-19 threat level from yellow to orange.
Omicron tearing across the country.
Health officials sounding the alarm.
We had our first Omicron death here in Houston.
Our first Omicron death.
We just had our first death.
Death.
The first known Omicron death. Country recording its first Omicron death. And Americans worry about Omicron.
President's playbook to tackle Omicron comes as the U.S. just recorded the first death.
A nation in crisis prompts a presidential address to tackle the Omicron spike.
Omicron is serious, potentially deadly business for unvaccinated people. The unvaccinated have a significantly higher risk of ending up in a hospital or even dying.
Okay, but just to be clear, you have one fatality that's listed as Omicron. Is that still true?
Yeah, really important question. So certainly my heart go out to the family of this case, this fatality that we learned of yesterday in Texas, and we are still learning more about that case.
So he died with COVID, but you can't say that he died from COVID.
Correct. The first known Omicron death in the U.S.
The country's first known Omicron death.
Death related to the Omicron variant.
The first known U.S. Omicron death.
Got Omicron, and it led to this severity in which he died.
The first Omicron-related death in this country.
This new threat of Omicron.
This new surge is quickly spreading a big alarm.
We do have, of course, the first Omicron death. First known Omicron-related death.
The first Omicron-related death in the United States.
Died after contracting Omicron.
You are facing death in a very dire winter.
The first U.S. Omicron-related death has now been confirmed.
I call on the purveyors of these lies and misinformation to stop it. Stop it now.
Oh man, just nothing but love for Matt Orfala. Friend of the show, Matt Orf. Fuck it. He's just, yeah, dude, tremendous work there, man. And I always do appreciate someone who expresses comedy just by being able to clip together a video, throw a little bit of music over it, edit in some sound. Like that shit's it's genius to me. It's so far out of the scope of what I could do. I'm very impressed by it. Fucking apparently easily impressed by stuff that I'm not good at. I don't know, but I any way you shake it, man, that guy's a freaking genius. That's beautiful. Yes, E. Heller, threat levels for the Omicron. You know, the little still word just kind of holds on George Bush's face is beautiful. But so I mean that's fundamentally what we're going to be talking about with Dad here in a minute. Is that yes, that happened. That's a super cut of all of those news stations chomping at the bit to report death. And then you finally get anyone in a position to actually answer that question. Not only can the woman from Harris County not say, oh yes, that was from, but CDC director, I can never remember her name. At any rate, the CDC director doesn't answer the question, dances around it, says a ton of words, all to say, no, that's correct. There's not, we can't really say that anyone has in fact died from this. Not here. So anyway, safe and effective, whatever the rituals are, mask up, torment your children. Have a nice day. I'm going to go ahead and bring Dan in now. Dan, I believe you're all familiar with, at least looking at the YouTube chat here. Independent journalist, a documentary filmmaker, an incredible writer, activist. I actually, I'll bring him in. I briefly met you, Dan, about a year ago today at the Department of Justice. We had brought a cake out because Julian Assange's extradition had been denied by Judge Vanessa Baretzer on January 4th. The action for Assange was in DC. I got there January 1st. And then we had an initial day in front of the UK embassy on the 3rd, and then January 4th we were in front of the DOJ. My good friend Pasta was in a ridiculous blue jacket. It was lovely. Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Glad to have you.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. Good to be on.
So I just played for the folks at home that mashup that Orf put together around your phone call with Harris County, Texas. Just the hyperbolic over sensationalizing of a death that cannot in fact actually be attributed to the thing that they're saying it was. What's it like doing real journalism in the US now? Because I think you're the only person who decided to follow up on that and give a phone call.
Well, it's interesting to see the total, like who responds to me debunking that and who doesn't. And it kind of falls along sort of predictable lines. Like the people who, want to believe that, Omicron is like gonna kill everybody and it is a winter of death we're facing and all this stuff, basically ignored it. And then the people who have their heads on straight and, are basically honest observers really picked up on it. There's a lot to be said for who those people are. Basically one of the things that obviously you've observed for a long time, and probably a lot of your viewers, is, basically people on the so-called left who, consider themselves leftists basically ignored it. It was more, people who aren't really, don't care one way or the other, or basically people on the right wing who picked up on it. So it's been really remarkable for me, just in the last kind of few weeks since I've, been opening my mouth or month or whatever on kind of, how COVID is being exploited. It's really interesting to see how the lines are drawn, and the kind of the pelting that I've had to go through online just for opening my mouth a little bit. So
the knives come from surprise places. Sometimes they really do, and that's something that we could talk about a little bit too, baby. There's a sort of predictable pattern of lines on which a lot of these people are going to fall, but I feel like this was sort of primed well in advance, because the hyper politicizing of coronavirus in general began immediately. I mean, it was about all you had, along with, oh my gosh, we're all gonna die, was this hyper politicization of, okay, well, if you're not wearing 18 masks and a hazmat suit, you're killing grandma, and you love Donald Trump. And the association with Trump and not following the rules was just sort of tagged on to everything.
Right. And that's still there. It's like, I guess if you're not, if you're like a leftist or something, you're supposed to just go along with this or ignore it, because otherwise, then you're a Trumper, you're a COVID denier. You just want the virus to spread and kill people and cull the herd. And it's just the most pathetic strawmans, and there's no real honest debate with these people. And so, one of the comments I've seen is like, oh, it's one death. What does that matter? And it's like, well, for one thing, we should be honest. What's wrong with telling the truth and making politicians tell the truth? And they completely ignore all of the context of this has happened again and again, and in particular this episode. And this investigation, the first part of which I'm gonna release today, I kind of lay out the backdrop, but This is right before Christmas and New Year's, when of course people are looking forward to traveling and seeing their families, and all of a sudden Omicron comes in, and everyone's like, oh God, what is this new variant going to do? It's even more transmissible. It's even more contagious. Everyone's going to get it. And so people are, I live in DC, and I think in cities all over the country, there are lines around the block to get a test from people who don't even have symptoms. They just, are now terrified that, oh my God, what if I have it? I don't want to go infect grandma. So maybe I should cancel my holiday plans, my Christmas plans, whatever. And tons of people did that. I know many people who canceled their plans and spent, Christmas and New Year's isolated and sad. I think that's part of the point, is to keep people in this kind of, permanent sort of depression, scared. So, that impacts so much else. So, it's, instead of talking to your neighbors and talking to your family and, talking to like maybe your uncle who did vote for Trump or whatever, it's, now we just have to live in this kind of hyper online meta world where everything is a caricature, and it's just, Don Lemon or whatever, whatever kind of TV personality is telling us like how to feel.
We have the wealth of human information at our fingertips in the internet, and everyone has chosen to deliberately live in a news bubble. And then if those bubbles ever rub up against each other, it is instant warfare. And one of the things that we've always tried to do on this show is not give a fuck about that at all in any way, shape, or form. And just try and have grown-up conversations with people about sometimes complex or controversial subjects. And lo and behold, we get to talk to everybody and we get to have fantastic conversations. And when this whole thing was happening in February of 2020, when they were starting to first talk about lockdowns and things like that, we were in Washington, D.C. It was the first week of Julian Assange's hearings.
Right.
We had done some events, did front of the Capitol and a couple other places, all around. It was a good week, but we're packing up and getting ready to leave going, are they going to let us on a plane? Are we actually going to get out of here? Oh my God, what if we get stuck in Washington, D.C. on a lockdown? How much would that suck? And then we ended up coming back several times, and it did. But the sort of lines in which media placed itself, I feel like because of this aspect of everyone's put themselves into a bubble in terms of where they get their media from, that it was somewhat preordained that the response was going to be the way the response was going to be. And the reaction to stepping outside of your bubble is more visceral now and more angry now than it was even several years ago before the whole Trump thing and fake news and this and that. Is that something that you're noticing? Am I off, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now it's people feel like their personal safety and well-being is at threat by by their neighbors or their friends or family members or whatever. So where it used to be, I disagree with your politics and like you're a jerk and I don't like you. Now you're actually a threat to me. It's really been escalated through obsessive, just nonstop fear mongering, like like Matt Orfalia's video showed so like hilariously, but also perfectly. And so, this is, I mean, it's kind of the same sort of program, the same agenda, the same method that we've seen for so long, where it's just, fear mongering and fear mongering and fear mongering. But this is really to a new level where it's turned people against each other in ways that seem kind of unimaginable, at least for some of us, maybe for not for, like Bill Gates or someone like that, who's been declaring that, humans are when you become vectors for virus, they're the ultimate danger, So, I mean, just since I've, put out that recording, I've had people reaching out to me mostly in private who are, basically like come from conservative background. And I come, I mean, I come from like the left, that's kind of like the political stripe that I come from, though it's not something that I, really care to identify with one way or the other.
Right.
And so now, these people are reaching out to me and feeding me all this fascinating information and really useful information. And these are people who, maybe voted for Trump or, have totally different kind of background than I do, but now, we've sort of united in as much as we're pursuing the truth of, how of the regime that's being kind of ushered in under the pretext of pandemic response. And so it's a really fascinating moment. I mean, if you live online, it can be kind of, a bit it's really easy to get sucked into these hyper partisan narratives and games. But it's like, you just go out and talk to real people and you see how this stuff has affected, real people, working class people, poor people. And it's just totally different than what's reflected on, the Twitter discourse. And so, I really recommend doing that, talking to like old friends you haven't talked to in a while or this or that, everyone, and just kind of like getting a little reality check. That's one thing. I'm from Arizona. I live in DC now. I went home to Arizona and I just saw like old friends who I haven't seen for a while. And it really kind of reinforced my perception that reality is quite different than social media would have us believe in these like curated, managed realities.
It's not only that too, but I mean, being involved in media and then at least, being involved in activism on a couple of different levels, there's such a disconnect from the fucking real world.
Yeah.
Such a disconnect. And so it's so vital to stay somewhat grounded, or to at least have somebody in your life that's going to be like, you realize that like maybe 30 people on the planet know that shit. And that, regular, ordinary people, when you go to the grocery store or whatever, leading an entirely different life that may have just bits and pieces of this. So like, yes, you sound crazy, or yes, you sound, like you're talking to an entirely different room of people. Sometimes it's so important to have connections with people that don't think like you. And I think that there's been such a push. Okay. When I hear somebody who has seen rationally what is going on with the COVID agenda, who says, I come from the left, to me, that means I saw through some shit in 2010 during Occupy. I maybe took part in it, identified as, that segment of the left that was anti-war, anti-corporate, anti-empire in general, pro saving the planet, largely don't really know how we're going to do that, but would like to do that. And that's kind of what the left was. Am I fair in that assessment? Like, yeah, kind of with you?
I think so, yeah.
So those are the people that I have seen that have kind of like, at least the people who understood what Occupy was about, that what was happening at the political level was so far downstream from what Occupy was about.
Right.
Those are the people that have recognized that the COVID agenda is way upstream from whatever is happening at the US political level, what is federally, statewide, whatever. That's all people reacting. And they're either reacting to orders or demands or both. But at hardly any point are they making the majority of the decisions in their lives. And then there's the people on the left and the people on the right too, because there's a hell of a counter narrative going right now. And I hope that we could talk about that a little bit. But most visibly, I think, to those of us who come out of that left space a decade or so ago, the people are the people on the left, because they're still on our radar for whatever reason, and who have just tripled down behind authority and tripled down behind these sort of almost passive aggressive defenses of nebulous concepts like climate change, like saving the planet, like being broadly anti-war, with the understanding that a little imperialism has to happen every once in a while if we want to keep the machine rolling, and it's just, it makes me feel good to watch their audiences dwindle away over the last several months or year. It makes me feel good to watch them go through it in real time and watch them lash out at like the people that they are hardwired to be racist against. For example, my friend Friarella Isabel at the Cavo Couch, who's a tiny little brown girl who gets nothing but shit from like all of the white savior complex having let's just appeal to authority every day left.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's this whole kind of like coterie of hyper online, pseudo kind of left, Democratic Party lapdogs who, I mean, instead of actually, criticizing power or exposing, what the powerful are doing, they spend their time attacking people like Fiorella, and it's just the most pathetic thing, and going after people who are trying to organize, trying to do something, and it's so obvious that they're just trying to gatekeep and discredit anyone who challenges the Democratic Party, and they want to put all their hope in in the Squad and AOC and Ilhan Omar and these people who are just sheepdogs for the Democrats, and so it's kind of pathetic, and it's kind of funny to see how they just can't resonate outside of their own tiny circles, and it's not very effective, but it's that's exactly what they are, is gatekeepers, and they just want us to vote for Biden, vote Democrat, and everything will be better because at least we won't have Trump. And it's the same thing they were doing during the Trump years, and these people are just kind of useless outside of that tiny little little space that they occupy, but they just are not relevant to the reality that the vast majority of people are living. And it's I see these guys like Walker Bragman, and I mean that's these are the types we're talking about, and No One Higgins, and these guys that it's like ostensibly they want to call themselves left, meaning that they're they care about working people and poor people and against the powers that be, but they're advocating lockdowns. And one of the craziest things to me is how the left has come to accept lockdowns. And when it I mean, actually the term lockdown sounds scary in the first place, number one. But number two, you have to look at what the reality of lockdowns are. I mean, if you do not think about what lockdowns are in practice, and you just think, well, everyone stays home, the virus dies out, and we go back to work, everyone, great, we just got to do that. Well, the reality is that only the privileged, those who are fortunate enough, get to stay home, and the others are forced to go to work. Those deemed essential workers, which are basically service workers, people at grocery stores, this kind of thing, food delivery, they have to go to work, get exposed to the virus, regardless of their health status. So if it's some 65-year-old guy who has diabetes, who spends his, who has to like work in a grocery store, he's going to probably get coronavirus, maybe have a hospitalization, and maybe die. So, Walker Bragman can feel safe in his McMansion. And it's just so cynical and deceptive. And when people, I don't expect people like him to think about it, but I really wish, I mean, that's one of the things, I was not really on this COVID thing for a long time. I wouldn't say I was wrapped up in the PSYOP, but I wasn't really questioning it for a long time. And I was busy with other things. But then it just got to a point where I was like, this is crazy. This is just too crazy. And I need to start fighting back. And so, we really have to look at lockdowns as a tool of the oligarchy, of the powers to crush the working class, to crush poor people, because that's exactly what they do. People have suffered so immensely: evictions, poverty, homelessness, kids being, losing basically years of education, an entire generation that's going to have problems for a long time because of these lockdowns. And the left, the broader left, wants you to think that it's like some humanitarian intervention from Biden. So that's like one of the core things that that I think we have to challenge. And people on the right tend to get it more. One, because they tend to see things in terms of like liberty and freedom, which are terms that like the left is kind of just reflexively kind of they don't like those terms because it's like very American or patriotic sounding, but it's like,
yeah, they're trigger words. They're supposed to invoke an image of a Chad with a assault weapon who is like standing in front of a Burger King on a stack of Iraqi bodies. That's what that's supposed to mean.
Yeah, exactly. Well put. So, but the question is, it's like, well, if we're gonna, use these kind of like this left lingo of, working class, this like this Marxist terminology, do workers deserve liberty? Do workers deserve freedom? Or should they be completely subject to whatever whims of the billionaires who control our economy? Should they be just subjects, little pawns for them? And obviously the answer is no, they should not. So yes, the working class should have, all of their rights, and they should not be, basically expelled from their homes. They should not be kicked out of their jobs just so, the wealthy of the world can feel safe. I mean, if this was actually about, the well-being of the country and regular people, why wouldn't they get rid of poverty? Why do we still have poverty? That's the biggest problem. So it's just the more you kind of fillet it open, the more blatant and angering it becomes.
I agree, and I want to flesh this out a little bit because there's a lot that we were trying to sound the alarm on throughout 2020 and paid a significant price for it too, to the point where at this point I'm dropping the link to our Rockfin live stream into the YouTube chat. Everything else that I plan on talking about is going to get me thrown off of YouTube, and they painted a giant target on this channel from like day one, and being a part of the MCSE network doesn't help in terms of the censorship. So links in the YouTube chat, please do click it. We love you guys, but we can't hang out. While I'm going to push a couple of buttons, Dan, please settle a bet for the YouTube chat. Who's on your shirt?
Oh, that's Hector Lavoe, the El Cantante, the great Puerto Rican salsa musician who.
Okay, so we're all wrong because I said Christopher Walken.
It totally looks like him. That's awesome. Yeah. Everyone should. Hector Lavoe is great. May he rest in peace. Which one, Steve? Which one should I promote? The Rockfin or the YouTube? Are we going to Rockfin?
The one that's on YouTube, or the one that I threw on Twitter and tagged you in, has the Rockfin link. I'm always gonna put the full episode links where I have them. And we love you, YouTube. We'll